Seinfeld fan. Maybe you recognize that. If not, you can ignore it. VitePress looks like a pretty cool tool. I have not used it, but it is, again, static site generator. There's a ton of those out there. If you've heard of Gatsby or Hugo or many of the other ones, you know, the concept of being able to generate a HTML-based website from Markdown is not a new concept. What is new for this is that it's view-based. So if you're already in the Vue ecosystem, that might be appealing to you. It's also the tool that they actually use to generate their own blog and their own technical documentation site. So for example, if you have the need to build a documentation type site like this, and you know, you like how this thing works, this could be a nice out-of-the-box way to do that. Again, I know that there are other solutions for that as well. One thing that is different about this one that's pretty cool is it has what they call view-enhanced Markdown. So again, all these tools use Markdown as their base for content, but this one has a way to kind of enhance it with interactivity using all the, you know, built-in things that Vue gives you for reactivity. So that's pretty cool, and that kind of sets it apart. It also has this interesting concept of static to SPA or single page app. That's really intriguing. So basically, most of these tools, again, generate static sites. So they're literally HTML, and that's all you get. VitePress actually generates a site that is static on first load, but then in the background initializes itself as a single page application. So as soon as you navigate from first load, all of a sudden you have a fully dynamic view-based application, which is pretty cool. That's a really interesting strategy. So they're kind of marrying the best of both worlds, kind of the performance of static, but with interactivity. So that's a pretty intriguing model. That actually kind of makes me want to try it out. And then there's this little library called pragmatic drag and drop. So again, sort of falls in the bucket of not everyone needs low-level drag and drop. So the library itself is kind of interesting, but the reason I'm highlighting it is it's actually made by Atlassian. So if you're familiar with Jira, Trello, some of the other Atlassian products, you've actually used this library under the covers. Again, it's low-level kind of drag and drop. It does come with optional visual styling, but you could sort of roll your own as well. The thing I found most interesting, actually, again, is I know most people probably don't care about a drag and drop utility, but when I sort of went and looked at what this is, I realized that Atlassian has this entire design system site. It's pretty cool. So this is all kinds of open source stuff that Atlassian provides in terms of resources. So some of it, like the drag and drop thing, let me actually click on that guy. So this takes you to sort of like the library homepage. And then of course it links to GitHub. It gives you a little demo, kind of showing you how it works with some starter docs. But if you click around through this, they actually are exposing all kinds of really cool libraries, components, tooling. They have pattern guides, UX guides. It's actually pretty cool. And I had no idea it existed. And it's from Atlassian, so you know it's pretty battle tested because, you know, you've used Jira, right? Millions of people use Jira. So like I said, more interesting, even if you don't care about the drag and drop component, I would highly recommend you checking out their design site because it's really pretty cool. So a little bit of interesting industry news. The web just had a birthday on March 12th, so happy birthday, web. The thing that I'm linking to is an open letter by Sir Tim. And the very first line of the letter starts off, quote, 3.5 decades ago when I invented the web, and then it goes on from there. And I just thought, what an amazing flex, right? To be able to say like, when I invented the web. I don't think too many people can say that. Pretty impressive. He basically highlights, you know, he actually did this 5 years ago too. On the 30th birthday, he did a similar open letter. And I think these two issues were highlighted even 5 years ago. And basically, he's talking now that they've just gotten worse. And the two main issues that he highlighted are centralized power, which is, you know, again, Facebook, Google, Apple being a problem. And then the exploitation of personal data, which again, would come as no surprise probably to anyone in this room. And he actually has solutions that he's proposing. So he's part of various industry groups that are trying to solve these problems. So if you're interested in any of that, you can, you know, follow these links. I found this one really interesting, the solid protocol, which I was not familiar with. but apparently it's been around for a while. And this is basically an attempt to solve the data problem, right? So how do we take back control of our personal data? So the whole concept with this is it's a decentralized system and secure system for managing your own personal data in a way that you can share it securely and revoke access to it securely. So it's kind of interesting. It's one of those things that until the industry actually adopts it, right, it's not going to help us too much. But apparently in looking at it, there are, it's a going concern. There's providers where you can go sign up and get a pod, which is their terminology for that secure data store. And you can actually manage your data today, apparently. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then this is something just to kind of be aware of. So I'm sure all of us are familiar with SSL and use it in our sites. You may not sort of low-level manage it or think about it day to day, but this is a little bit of inside baseball type stuff. But basically, Let's Encrypt is nowadays, it's sort of the service that pretty much most people use for SSL certificates. For many years now, they've used what's called a cross-signed certificate. So basically, early on in their history, back before people fully trusted them, they basically inherited the trust of this IdenTrust CA, Certificate Authority, and they signed their certificates with that root certificate so that people would trust them, basically. And that was kind of required for years. Fast forward till today, Let's Encrypt is kind of now the gold standard. Everyone is aware of them, everyone trusts them, so there's really no need to involve other certificates. Let's Encrypt can basically use their root certificate and everyone can just trust it. Cuts out the middleman, it reduces expense for them. One thing I learned, which I didn't think about, is there's actually a non-zero amount of latency involved in the SSL handshake for each step of verifying certificates when you have a chain of certificates. It's not much, but when you add it up at web scale, right, it adds up. So lots of reasons why they're basically letting that expire. Cloudflare is also, a huge issuer of SSL certificates. They're going to stop issuing these cross-signed certificates starting in May. So really the only reason to be concerned is if you have to support old Android. For the most part, any kind of modern device already trusts Let's Encrypt, but there are sort of like version 7 and below Android devices that just never could be updated and never got the certificate that we're talking about that would break. So if you happen to know that you care about that, you should go read up on this and find out about it. If not, you can just treat it as some trivia. And then introducing VLT or Volt. I thought we were done with these Web 2.0 names, but I guess we're still doing that. But this one is noteworthy because it was founded by 3 of the founders of NPM, or principals, including Isaac Schluter, who was the founder. It's also well-funded by VCs, which is kind of the thing to do these days. And this is their description. The packaging ecosystem has stagnated, so there's a wealth of opportunity to innovate. So that basically left me shrugging my shoulders thinking, I don't know exactly what that means. I thought kind of NPM and some of the other ones had already sort of solved it, but apparently not. So there's nothing much to talk about here other than to say it is very well funded and the people behind it know about packaging. So it might be one to keep an eye on. So I'm interested to see where this one goes. And then another bit of inside baseball type update, but Redis dropped their BSD license. If you're not into open source licensing, you may not think about that or wonder why that's a big deal. If any of you know me back from the old EXTJS days, I know a little bit about changing licensing and what problems that might cause. But apparently, so BSD, much like MIT, and there's a handful of licenses that are called permissive. So it basically means you can download any code with BSD. You can use it however you want. You can resell it, you can repackage it, you can use it however. They are switching from that to what they're calling a dual source available license, which basically just means it's a custom license. That is something that they invented. They claim that to end users and their customers, there is no change. And they're targeting this at, quote, competitive offerings. So basically, they don't want you turning around and offering a key value type database or cache or whatever, that they consider Redis to be. It's kind of the classic playbook for open source that decides they don't really want to do open source. They really want to make money. So the bottom line for it really is that your mileage may vary. If you personally don't care about the licensing, then it really doesn't affect you. But there are lots of big companies where these kinds of changes actually do matter. There are lots of companies that, like, if you, for example, have a product that relies on Redis or embeds Redis or something like that, that you're trying to sell, and you try to go to some of these big enterprise companies, this could actually be a no-go depending on their internal policies around licensing. So again, it's an interesting one. Yes, question? Yes. Yeah, so the question was, I made a quip on this slide about Web 2.0 naming. And so the quip was basically back in the old days of Web 1.0, we sort of had names like Google and Yahoo and all those. Those were kind of like goofy names, but they were phonetic and, made sense. And yeah, and yeah, they're still all .com, but when I said the Web 2.0, that came into basically people picking the same kinds of names, but then just dropping vowels out of them to make them Web 2.0 was kind of the joke. Like Flickr, the photo service, Flikr. So those were very common back in the early aughts to make them short and catchy. And you'd have to ask the cool kids, not me. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so then this one is interesting, this Web Neural Network API. So we sometimes highlight W3C standards that are interesting. This one has reached candidate recommendation draft. And basically, this is a web API for interacting with machine learning via your own hardware. So, if you wanted to write something like a facial recognition algorithm or something in JavaScript, this API gives you a way to actually leverage the GPU and the architecture of your own machine through a standard API to be able to do that kind of stuff. Pretty interesting. And there's an explainer that kind of goes in more depth about all that. To be honest, it's a little over my head, although maybe I just didn't spend enough time on it. I'm not big into that world, but it is very, very interesting technology. So check it out if you're in that world. In case you missed it, you may have heard of Font Awesome, which has been around for a long time. They do, fonts and icons. Shoelace is also a library that's been around for a while. They do web components, so it's kind of a component library similar to React and Vue. What I did not know is that apparently Font Awesome kind of acqui-hired the guy behind Shoelace a couple of years ago, and they've now come out with this thing called Web Awesome, which is that combination. It's basically taking the component library from Shoelace, building in all the nice visual stuff from Font Awesome, including the icons and everything. And then interestingly, they have a Kickstarter that's going on right now. It just started a couple of days ago. So you get a huge discount off of their products, and they have levels where they're adding more things if they reach certain levels, typical Kickstarter stuff. So it's pretty interesting. The thing I thought was kind of cool about it is that if you're like me, or really like most people in our industry, we go through these trends, right? So we can talk about JavaScript and React and now React fatigue and other things. It's similar, I think, like we had Bootstrap came out, and it was this revelation because now we had these nicely styled buttons we could just drop in everywhere. And so everyone started using Bootstrap, and then everyone got sick of Bootstrap. Now we have Tailwind and some other things. So if you're experiencing CSS style fatigue with whatever current thing you're using, this might be a good option to just break out of that, try something different. One other thing that's kind of cool is they're going to include a visual theme builder. So it's just a WYSIWYG thing where you can customize the theme really easily, output it. So that looked pretty cool. I mentioned the documentary about React earlier. There's a Node one that just came out. So there's this company called Honeypot. They've done a bunch of them that are interesting. So this one just came out a couple of weeks ago about Node. It's kind of an hour-long history of Node. They interview Ryan Dahl, the creator, and a bunch of other people. So pretty well done if you're interested in that. And then last but not least, I always try to end on something kind of fun and different. Actually, I have two for today, but this one is called FC variable. So this is actually a font. And what you're looking at in that image are characters. Actually, it's a single character, but they're variations of a character from a font. And the FC, like Austin FC, it's football club. So apparently someone decided that they wanted to, I didn't get my command, but I'll go back. So this is FC variable. So this is a font. If you're familiar with variable fonts, it basically means it's one font, but the variations are built in, like you can do the font, the width of the actual parts of the font, and you can stretch it and do all kinds of stuff as just, variations of the font. So you might have seen when you download a font file and explode it out, there's like 12 or 15 files that are different variations. This is actually built into the file format where you can, in a variable font, you can actually do it on the fly and customize attributes of it visually. And so the cool thing about this is, again, I'm not going to like go through all of this stuff, but these are basically different, the way you would normally do italic or bold on a text font, you can do these kinds of things. So rotalic is one of the variations. And the thing that's really cool, so here's an example of like a dynamic thing where I can drag this and I'm actually changing that thing on the left, right? So if I view source on this, see if I can do this and talk. I know you can't see that. Give me 1 second. Okay, so if you, sorry, lost it. Okay, this guy. So you see this guy that I'm highlighting, right? The font family is right here. So if I change that to times, you can see that this is actually just a character, right? All I did was I changed the font in CSS to a different font. So you can see this is literally a font. And this one doesn't work. I think this one worked better. Let's see if I can do this. So if I change the font from goal font to times, and then you can see if I'm dragging this around, well, this one didn't change either. So it sort of depends on the actual attribute. If the times font had this particular variation, we would see it changing, but it doesn't. But you can see that that's what it is. And then if I just change the font back, it changes it right back to the goal. So probably not practical, but very, very interesting use of a variable font, which I thought was cool. And then the final thing I have for today is emoji explosion. And I did not do this. I copied this from their description. This is how they describe their own thing. It blasts emoji like fireworks all up in your HTML page. This is what the code looks like. And it really is just better to try the demo. So this is pretty much what it does. You can also do interesting things like blue only. Let's see, here's a large one, which is kind of cool. Here's Tour de France. And then my favorite, everything everywhere all at once, which is this one. So there's actually a bunch of these demos that I went through every single one of them, and I would encourage you to as well because they're really fun. But I'm not going to make you sit through that right this second. So that's all I have for today. Really appreciate your time, and we'll hand it over to Fabio. Thanks, y'all.
Okay. Oh, okay. Mhm. Good.
All right, sorry, we're just still getting used to uh, uh, the Zoom requirements and so forth, so we weren't quite prepared, but I think we're set now.
Oh, better. Yeah. Can you all hear me okay? I'm also the clumsiest person ever, so it's probably gonna fall at some point. But let's give it a try. All right. So, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for the invitation. You know, been this is I think my first time talking to mostly web developers and web JavaScript-ish related meetup. So this is going to be interesting. Usually I'm used to Python conferences or meetups and stuff, so be forgiven. So first, I wanted to ask more about you and get a sense of how many of you actually know Python. Okay, how many of you are mainly web developers, front end? Half of you. All right. How many of you are actually just learning, like within 1 year of experience developing? Cool. And 5 years, or actually more than 5 years. All right, mostly experts. All right. So this is going to be very hacky and full of demos, full of live code and whatsoever. So things might break, including my laptop if this thing falls into it. A little bit about me. I've been all over the place. Originally, I'm half Brazilian, half Italian. Moved to the US a few years ago, and basically meaning I talk many languages, but none of them properly, and you can tell. So be forgiven on that as well. I'm creator of PyScript and developed within Anaconda, and been in the Python ecosystem for a long time. I think I started 2001 or two. So really a lifetime ago, being involved in the community for a long time. Helped organize many conferences, was former chairman of the EuroPython Society, which is just this society to promote Python and the ecosystem and everything. And actually that's a big, I have a lot of empathy for people running community events and trying to spread the word and build a community. So really thank you, the organizers, for doing this. It's a great, it's a lot of work and oftentimes not really appreciated. Also, thank you, Expedia, for hosting. My best place to book travels, so you should book yours through Expedia as well. And overall, I work for Anaconda. I'm the lead for PyScript, another product that we have called PyExcel, which allows you to run Python in Excel. And also EduBlocks, which is this learning platform for you to learn Python with blocks. Pretty similar to Scratch. Well, welcome. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And so when I first started thinking about what to talk about today, I wasn't really sure because of the mix between Python and JavaScript and the audience and not really knowing what y'all would expect. So I thought about, well, just starting from what PyScript is. And so how many of you have heard of PyScript before? 2 people. Awesome. So if you search on the web for PyScript, you probably could see, especially a year ago, actually a year and a half, close to when we launched it, you would see things like this. Or things like this, you know. And a lot of clickbait, you know, memes and things like this around, oh my gosh, now PyScript allows you to run Python in the browser, JavaScript is dead, yada, yada, yada. Reality is that you could already use Python in the browser before PyScript. There was already Pyodide around. There was Python and other things, other projects that were mostly transpiling Python to JavaScript. So it was not really Python in the browser. It was mostly Python syntax that would be translated to JavaScript. Pyodide is a different project though, and really brings Python in the browser as a full interpreter. But it was, now it's less, but it was kind of tricky, or not so tricky, but developer focused and has many complications that we will talk about. The goal of PyScript is really to reduce the learning curve and all the barriers into adopting Python in the browser overall. So I like to see PyScript more like this. We're basically this clueless hobbit just at the beginning of the adventure, and JavaScript is way more mature, has way more skills, fought many battles, know what it's doing. PyScript is really learning on the job, and you know, how do we bring the web things into the Python language? And they're very different in the sense that if you're expecting to run your application on the underlying system, you expect to have threads and storage and other things that the browser really don't allow you to do the same way. And Python is also not really async, everything is synchronous compared to JavaScript where everything is asynchronous. So there's a lot of differences. I love this one actually, which is the Reddit subreddit PyScript actually image, which is basically the PyScript philosophy. We don't want to compete with others or reinvent the wheel. Everything that is mature or can use or borrow, we will try to do. So we don't want to reinvent a Python interpreter in the browser. We don't want to reinvent JavaScript. Actually, we want to allow people to use JavaScript with Python and Python with JavaScript and vice versa, and hopefully more languages as well. So what really is PyScript? It's basically, to simplify, is Python in the browser, literally Python, you know, and the full interpreter. And you can run either in the main thread or in web workers. And it's also Python with batteries included. Python as a language is known for having a lot of batteries, and you just download it and you have a ton of libraries that you can use. Pretty much the same thing. We want to make sure that we keep that going, but with focus on being a web, within a browser and in the web context. Also, it's a platform. And what's the difference between a platform and a framework? Anyone? I know at least one person that knows. Ted. Yes. So a framework is a piece of software that allows you to write applications with it, right? A platform is a piece of software that allows you to write frameworks on top of it, basically. And PyScript is a platform that allows you to extend and write frameworks with JavaScript. Actually, via Python is a little stretch right now, also because we refactor things. When PyScript first came out, we supported both, but really because, well, PyScript and Python in the browser has the disadvantage that it's not baked in your browser, right? You need to download it and run in WASM and everything else. So it's basically slow. So having Python plugins means that they are going to run and be initiated later. So we are prioritizing on JavaScript plugins, meaning you can write plugins in JavaScript, and those will augment the capabilities of PyScript itself. It also offers a powerful FFI system where you can actually use JavaScript libraries in Python and vice versa. Python libraries in JavaScript, which is a big, reason why I like that image before. It really tries to allow people to use the strengths of both languages. And we have a really, really strong focus on keeping things human and making APIs human and reducing complexity overall. Well, why would we do that, right? We already have JavaScript. Why would you like to bring Python to the browser? Mostly because Python is the most popular language and has been for the last 5 years, ups and downs with JavaScript mainly. And it's popular because it has a strong component of education and making things as simple as possible. And, bringing that to the web is a big thing. And we wanted to basically continue the Python ecosystem, making it bigger than it is today. It's weird that, this is a quote for John Carmack, basically saying that, the most important thing really is user value. If all apps, all technology, in most cases, at the end of the day, they serve a purpose of really providing value to a user or solving problems or reducing time for things, etc. And that's a big component around the Python programming language and the Python community. There's a strong component of, making things that are related to people and solving problems. So given that, Python is super popular, but it really sucks on mobile. You cannot do much Python on mobile today. There's a really cool project called Beware that is targeting that problem. But it's still maturing, and it still needs to catch up in popularity and everything else. And also Python sucks in the browser. So we wanted to solve that problem as well. Also, Python, as many other languages, have a hard time distributing applications. Packaging is hard, yada, yada, yada. So end of the day, we really wanted to make it really easy to share applications, share code, and making programming fun, really. So this is where you can find more information about PyScript. PyScript.net is the home of the open source project. And if you go there, you will see all the, how to use PyScript and whatnot. But let's take a look and really how to start using PyScript. All you need to do really is just add a couple of scripts of lines to your HTML and add the style sheet and your the core JavaScript library, and then you're basically good to go. And the way you add scripts, you can use either custom element called PyScript. It's nice because it looks cool. It's less convenient because actually, if you can define Python code either with a source file or within the tag. If you use the PyScript tag, because it's a custom element, until it fully loads PyScript, we'll show the text. So it's not really great. So we're promoting more of the script type Py or type MPy. We'll see the difference in a second. But in short, all you need to do is define the type that you want to run, which basically means the interpreter, either Pyodide or MicroPython. The source code, basically this is the entry point. You can have many modules and many other files, but overall, you can just have one entry point. And your configuration file. The configuration file is where you define your dependencies, files that you want to upload, JavaScript libraries that you want to upload as well, and things like this. And there you go. You can start running your Python code with it. The PyScript architecture is quite simple, honestly, I think. It basically runs on top of WASM. This is actually true for Pyodide. I don't think it's totally true for MicroPython, but Pyodide runs on top of Memscripten, and it provides the full Python interpreter with CPython and the standard library and all the modules on top of it. And PyScript comes on top with all the basically PyScript standard library, all the tags and widgets that we add to the namespace, some of the JavaScript things that we add as well. But basically, it has the concept of interpreters, and it adds a layer as an API to users on top of those interpreters. We actually have a couple of experimental interpreters, both Lua and Ruby, that are not Python you can use today. Hopefully, we're going to be adding more in the future. But anyway, that's cool, but isn't that slow? Python is fairly big, actually. That was one of the main issues and the main criticisms at the beginning, because Pyodide is around 7 megabytes, which basically it's a no-go for mobile, or slower connections and everything. But MicroPython and Exchange is quite small, snappy, and runs really fast. So full MicroPython and PyScript, I think it's actually, I was conservative. I think it's more around 200K kilobytes, but it's quite fast. In fact, this presentation is written in PyScript and MicroPython as well. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. I uploaded a couple. We provide a terminal that you can just play around and write Python stuff. So like in this case, you can have version. I don't think I'm running workers, but I can show an example later. And you basically just type around it. This type of interface was basically started to provide something like a Jupyter notebook where you can experiment and write Python code. We now removed the initial REPL that we had that allowed, which is this one, and we now have an editor, the Py editor that you can just run, and we'll re-add the concept of PyScript notebooks soon, because we want to do things properly now. You can run. One of the reasons people wanted PyScript as well is because Python has a very rich data science, machine learning ecosystem, a lot of libraries. Well, Pyodide supports a lot of them. So in this case, this is a code with, I think it's running SciPy to do k-means clustering on top of this browser, which is really cool. This other example real quick, is running an Onyx runtime on with PyScript and Minst, basically having in browser a model that recognizes numbers. It doesn't really do a great job, to be honest. Most times this time it's working kind of well, but yeah, I'll actually stop here while it's doing a good job. But the idea is that you can run models in the browser that you would otherwise not be able to. This is another example running k-means with Panel, which is a Python visualization library in the browser. It provides some rich widgets, like in this case, and allows you to interact with data. And it doesn't really tell a lot because honestly, JavaScript has a lot of really great plotting libraries. I think the value here is less on the plotting libraries and more on the data science algorithms that you can have access to and things like this. So I showed this one. Another thing that actually allows you to, Python has really good libraries around managing tables, type of data structure, Excel files, CSVs, and whatnot. Pandas is a great library that people love. This example here, actually written by Ted, I think, is showcasing an Excel file in the browser being opened and manipulated with pandas. Fairly simple. And this is the source code for this, basically. Just basically reading the file with pandas and then creating a sheet element on the page and then writing the HTML. That's it. 3 lines of code. Back to here. There's also SQLite on WASM. And this example, also written by Ted, showcases interacting with a SQLite database directly in the browser. So in this case, I have an insert function and a select data function. These are examples here, but I can interact with it actually and say insert. And I don't know. Mario is a quite Italian name. Let's do that one. And insert data. All right, and then select data. You can see it should have inserted the data set as well. Fairly simple, but cool example. This example showcases a Star Wars data set and basically using Python. I think it's using SciPy or NumPy to count the number of interactions between characters in Star Wars and then using D3 to plot it, which is really cool because the Python community has been envying the JavaScript community around D3 and us not having a cool project like that. So making the two work together is a quite nice thing. And you can play with it, whatsoever. It's not only about data. Actually, now we're adding more stuff, but and now it's part of the JavaScript standard library as well, access to DOM and media devices and whatnot. So in this case, I can come here, like device, and then we provide functions to basically just do video control and snap pictures and download stuff. The source code for this actually is also quite simple. PyDOM, we're going to take a look at it later, but it's pretty much similar to jQuery API in a Pythonic way to query the DOM. The media API in PyScript PyWeb provides access to the media devices. So in this case, I just ask for my media devices. It returns all of them, and then I can just add it to the page. Let's see. People have been doing games, developing games with PyScript as well, which is really cool. Everybody loves games. So in this case, it's just a simple tic-tac-toe. But you can access. The cool thing is that you can either use JavaScript game engines, or you can decide to use Python game engines to build your apps. In this case, we are using Python game framework, game engine to develop this one, and let's add into the browser. It has audio, but right now it's muted. Other things that people are doing with PyScript, basically, I don't have my Lego set here, but because of the browser providing all APIs to connect to your underlying system, like serial port and whatnot, and PyScript supporting MicroPython, and a lot of the IoT devices actually running MicroPython on them, you can actually write Python code in your browser and then download it to Lego Prime robots or Arduinos and whatnot, and just basically connect and program your devices without installing anything on your computer, or even controlling remotely. If I have a robot or a Lego device here, I can open my ports and share with others, and people can connect and control at the distance, which is really, really cool. But unfortunately, I don't have that for the demo. People have been using also in all sorts of ways to provide better documentation for Python developers. The pandas library that I mentioned earlier is super popular, and Dylan Castillo is someone that basically developed a cheat sheet around how to use pandas. And the cool thing is that you can actually just run in the browser, and you don't need infrastructure to run it on the server side, and people can learn and interact with the data set directly in the browser, basically creating a really interactive experience. PyScript has been announced a little less than 2 years ago. I would say it's been around for more or less 1.5 years. And now we're seeing more mature frameworks being built on top of PyScript. One of them that I really love is LTK, which is a visualization library on top of PyScript. And as you can see, it's quite fast. This whole thing loaded really fast, running MicroPython, and has a lot of UI elements and things like this. So just to walk over some of the things you can do with it, you can create dynamic DOM operations and add elements to your DOM. The syntax is pretty simple, and it's inspired by the TK library. It's a very famous older library in Python, ported to the browser. Actually, kudos to Chris Lafra, who wrote it. Excellent, amazing developer and engineer. So just to walk over, you can define inputs and whatnot. And he has an example of tic-tac-toe. And the whole code for this is basically just here, and the style is here. So pretty concise as well. You can manage tables and whatnot. This is pretty cool. You can do custom stuff with it. You can run full apps with menus and whatnot. Also, in this case, really concise definition for everything. He has a really cool example of a pub sub as well, which is cool. Documentation. I'll do this as last one because it's a little invasive, but it has support for SVGs, more complex type of things. But Oh, the tutorial is also cool. It has support for tutorials. So if I click here, I can go through the tutorial and basically until you do a specific operation, in this case, I need to drag. It doesn't go ahead with the tutorial. Pretty handy. And then this one, which one? Yes. Which actually, this is all written with LTK framework, and it has like auto advance mode, whatnot. And basically this is a virtual resume for LTK. Without going too much into the details of this one, I also wanted to show another one, which is Invent. This is going to be really quick because it's really at the beginning of the Invent journey. But what Invent is, it's a app framework built on top of a PyScript that is basically beginner friendly. It's not only for beginners, but it's a beginner friendly, and it tries to simplify the concept of an application to allow people to focus on specific parts of it, right? So you have your UI application UI, and then you have, usually for most applications, you have your interface, which can be a terminal or graphical. You have the data that you need to run your application, so basically variables and whatnot. And then you have a series of blocks of logic, or interacting with I/O, with media, and things like this. So in this case, this is the builder part of Invent. So we have the concept of pages, and you can create multiple pages, add widgets to the page, and then connect the dots with graphically. So in this case, if I wanted to create a app with a switch and maybe a file uploader, and then maybe a couple of buttons, I can do a row here and then add a button. And it's still very rough and not really totally with all the edges smooth, but basically I can just upload those things. Ideally, I can say, change the style of these and put like color, change the title and whatnot. And connect logic with blocks. So something like when I press, we also have the concept of channels. So basically every event happening to a specific thing can be broadcast to a channel. So in this case, I want to say channel 1. And so if I click on here, that click event is going to be broadcast to the channel 1. And I can basically program what I want to do when the click happens. Something like subscribe to the channel 1. When the button is pressed, I can go in data store, add to the data store. I don't know, a counter, the number, start from 0, add here. I can say when I subscribe to the channel, set the data store or change the counter by 1. And then basically all I need to do to publish it is just click on publish, and it's uploaded to PyScript.com, and I can see that app if I didn't forget stuff. So anyway, this is just another of a project very, very early on. It's not even in alpha, but just to say that we're building stuff on top of PyScript. But I think the most interesting part for this crowd is actually, how I wanted to talk about the interactions between JavaScript and PyScript and what we can do to basically bring the two worlds together. So as I mentioned, PyScript provides an FFI. Actually, both the interpreters that we have, MicroPython and Pyodide, provide their own FFI, foreign function interface. They are a little different. So for this reason, we added facade layer. We unified APIs on the PyScript level so that for the user, they just have one interface and we deal with the differences ourselves. So in this case, if I want to interact with anything in the DOM or anything in the JavaScript side, I can just import window. And anything that is exposed in window on the JavaScript side, it can be used on the Python side as well. So in this case, from PyScript import window and document, I can use any method of document like query selector or anything like this, and I get a proxy element, which is basically just an object that trades. It manages data types between Python and JavaScript, translating the types. And then the same thing for window. I can access any object that is on the window namespace this way. We also provide an interface, a Pythonic API to use the DOM and connect to the DOM interface. So it's called PyDOM. And as I mentioned, it has a similar API to jQuery. In this case, a little different, to be honest. This is just showcasing how you create a new div, and then how can you create a paragraph inside a div, and then you add classes and set the HTML value, and then change the background. And this is the other side of the API, where querying elements, all you have to do is just pass selectors to the getter of a Python object, the PyDOM object, and then it just return a collection of elements that you can just use pretty much like this jQuery. And you can also do multiple operations on the collection side of things as well, or you can just select one of the elements and use it directly. So a quick example. In this case, the application is just importing stuff from PyScript and importing PyDOM. In PyScript, we have what we call a when decorator. Decorator in Python is just a function that you can use to decorate other functions, so that this function is going to run before the decorated function. And we also have a display function. In PyScript, you print anything with the print function, like you print to console with the print function. But because of the web, when you do print, where you want to print, in the JavaScript console or the DOM. So we just added a new function called display, and this one will print to the DOM. So all this code to the document, all this code here just creates a new div, a new paragraph, which is the example that I showed earlier. Append the div to the body of the DOM, queries for a paragraph, and then this display basically prints to the page this, and this is what you're seeing here. And then to interact with events in HTML, you can add, when I click on anything with this selector, execute this function, which in this case is just gonna set the background to yellow, background of the paragraph to yellow. And this other one, when I click on the element with ID highlight all, it's gonna change the background to red. Actually, going to change the background of all H2 elements to red. If I click here, highlights, and then click here, highlights to red. Oh yeah, sorry. Is it better? All right, so this. So checking real quick the documentation, as I mentioned, we have the FFI API, we have the PyDOM API, but also you can just work with JavaScript directly. In the config, you can upload any module, any JavaScript module, but basically just setting the module like this, this way in the configuration. And you can define aliases for this. So basically, in this case, if I load the leaflet library like this and define an alias, you can just access that directly in the Python Python scope with that name, pretty much like in this example. You can also reference PyScript JavaScript as a global reference. So like in this case, you can just access window or document. As I mentioned, anything in window will appear in the window. In the JavaScript window will appear in the Python window object as well. And pretty much a bunch of support for JavaScript and mostly also managing the translation between types and objects between the two. And there's a concept of proxy, which is just this transparent object that translates between the two, but you can also decide to render things as object maps and directly, which would make things more compatible. We also support workers, and just to go here in the docs, running things in workers in PyScript is pretty easy if you have the right HTTP headers, which we define them. We already set them for you on PyScript.com. But if you're running on GitHub pages or elsewhere, you need those set. And just to say I want to execute Python code on a worker, all I need to do is just pass the attribute worker to the PyScript to the script tag. So in this case, let me show you an example. This is basically running a worker with a time sleep in here, and then it wakes. Actually, if you want to go check the code, you can see the code is fairly simple. All we do here is just import things from PyScript, write document patch here, and then we display hello world just because of how display is. And I set the target as test, which comes before that. It sets before. But then we append sleeping. And then here, the loop, every second we print another dot and then run away. So if I run it again, and Zoom always gets in the way, you can see it happening real time. So basically this is running in a worker. Do you notice anything cool about this, even for JavaScript developers? Can you access the DOM in JavaScript on a JavaScript worker transparently? In theory, you can't, right? In theory, you cannot just do document dot query selector or whatever and access a DOM element and write from a worker. But because of this in a library, actually a JavaScript library called Coincident, which is written by one of the main core devs of PyScript, we basically bake that in PyScript. So you can actually just access the DOM transparently, either in the main thread, which is always available in JavaScript as well, but also in a worker in PyScript. Let me see more stuff. So we provide a bunch of built-ins in PyScript as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we have window, document, but also display and the when decorator that I mentioned, and the whole JS modules, which is a pretty cool feature. Basically, you can upload anything JavaScript on its own JavaScript namespace, and given an alias, it's going to show up in the Python namespace. We also provide an alias for JavaScript fetch, and yeah, a couple of functions to just translate from Python to JavaScript and vice versa. Yeah, those are not so interesting kind of edge cases. Let me go ahead with more interesting stuff. We also provide a terminal that you can use just to type Python stuff and experiment with Python. We provide the editor, as I mentioned, that you can just hop in and write Python code. And this one is quite neat, actually. I wanted to show an example of basically a React application running on PyScript written in Python, right? So this is the code for it. The HTML is pretty simple. all it does really is just loading PyScript and then instantiating a new script element with the source code, the entry point. The main.py is quite simple as well. It's just loading some stuff from PyReact and then defining an application with a handler for clicks, and then the div, hello world div. And then the PyReact code is where basically we define the glue between React and on the JavaScript side and the Python side, really. But it's actually not a lot of code if you see it, right? But hey, you have a React application that you can interact with, just works. What I like about it, honestly, is that I'm definitely not a JavaScript developer. My JavaScript is like 10 years old when I still did some JavaScript stuff. But React never really fit in my brain properly. I think I'm more of a Vue person. It's better in my brain. But what I like about this is that actually it's quite neat and clean as code. It may be because I'm more familiar with Python or whatsoever, but it's quite cool, I think. The other thing also is that it's running on top of MicroPython, which is super fast. So if you basically just if you just scan the QR code and run in your phone, it just runs, immediately and really snappy. If you want to try. Give you a couple seconds to try it out. Oh. All right. Anyone needs more time? Need more time? Raise your hand. All right. No one. To wrap it up, PyScript is almost 2 years old. I wouldn't say it's in full maturity, but it's definitely mature enough. It had a lot of interest early on, became super popular, but it's steadily growing over the years, over the months, actually 2 years. It's ready, I think, for production in a lot of environments, to be honest. We have a lot of use cases of seeing it in production environments that it just runs. The main important thing really, which is something I advise anyone anyway for Python on JavaScript in general, is to pin the libraries, and mostly because things can shift underneath. But otherwise, if you have an application running and you pinned your requirements and dependencies, it's fairly stable. Best way to get started with PyScript, it's something that I would advise PyScript.com. And we have our pool bunny. Actually, I always run this experiment. Which of the bunnies you like the most? So if you like the first one, raise your hands. Half. Okay. If you like the piece of art here, raise your hands. Okay. Our designer is always very depressed when I ask this question, and most people like this one. And exactly. So this is proper kudos to the author of this thing here. Actually, initially, nobody actually understood it was a proper bunny. Half of people thought it was a bunny, and others thought other animals. But anyway, PyScript.com, as I showed earlier, is this platform to run it. It's really similar to what GitHub Pages is, but focused on PyScript apps. It provides you an editor to interact with the code and whatnot. And it's basically this thing that I've been showing the demos from. I also wanted to really quickly do a public shout out to the PyScript community, all the core devs and people supporting it, especially also the other members of the community supporting, like the Pyodite folks or MicroPython. They've been super helpful and really collaborative. And that's it. Thank you. And if you have any questions, let me know. Question here.
You mentioned alternately two different systems. One apparently is needed, MicroPython or Pyodide.
Mhm.
Said Pyodide was huge and MicroPython was tiny. Do you know the internals of these things? Do you know how they work? For instance, Pyodide seemed to use something called Cython, meaning C language, perhaps. And the other one, does it also do that? Or does it do something else?
Yeah, they're actually both written in C underneath. The difference really is that Python is a language that evolved over the years, and one of its strong features is batteries included, and that's one of the reasons it's big, because the Python standard. One of the reasons Pyodide is big because the standard library is big, and it also includes additional packages. MicroPython is a smaller version of Python focused on embedded devices. So it really focused on being the smallest as possible. It from running things on Arduino, or I'm pretty sure it's on Mars, basically. One of the rovers uses MicroPython on it, right? The focus is just different. And it skips some of the most complex features of Python that gives makes it so dynamic and so flexible as a language. So it's not a fully 100% one-to-one mapping to Python. MicroPython doesn't support meta classes and other things that are more complex and end up increasing the size of the language itself. So that's the bigger difference, really.
But they both use C to talk to Inscripton. Is that right?
Honestly, I'm not sure MicroPython uses Emscripten underneath, to be honest. I never really looked into it. But yeah, Pyodide just uses Emscripten on top of WASM because it provides most of the APIs, to make it a sort of POSIX compatible underlying system, so that basically all the IO side of things and files handling and all of that is already. Other questions? All right. Thank you for